You want to know about some BS? Some like inside baseball internet content stuff? Let me tell you. When we sell advertisements on our podcasts, we do that well in advance, and we say, this is how many impressions we're going to deliver to you, and then they give us money, and we tell them things about those impressions, like it's going to be at the beginning of the podcast, or in the middle, or at the end. The middle is the most valuable spot, but not just the middle, the first ad in the middle, and then the second ad is a little bit less value, and if there's a third ad, then the middle ad is like, I don't want to be here at all. And so, of course, lots of podcasts now have like an early mid-roll, and then a late mid-roll. They have 2 mid-rolls, even if it's like a 40-minute long podcast, and they'll have ads in the beginning and ads in the end. And the most valuable ad is the first mid-roll. So not the first one that plays. If there's one at the beginning, that one usually gets skipped. The first ad that's in the middle of the episode. And it's more valuable the earlier in the episode it is, because people don't always finish the podcast. And you can kind of tell by how many people end up using the discount codes or whatever, that there are more people listening to that first ad than the last ad. And podcasts are and have always been messier than the rest of the advertising business, because you can't tell if an ad is actually being listened to or watched. Now, of course, you also can't do that with like television or radio, but you can with YouTube. Like if there's an advertisement on this video, the advertiser knows if you watched it or if you skipped it. They might even know if you turned your volume down. But of course, ads are super easy to skip on podcasts. Lots of people do skip the ads. I certainly skip ads. And yet they are still valuable advertising that a whole entire industry is based on. So currently, when we sell podcast ads, we're not really selling the impression directly. We're saying this is how much an impression tends to be worth to people, and that impression might be an impression. It might be someone just downloading the podcast and never listening to it. It might be someone skipping all of the ads, but on average, you know, the advertiser, that it's going to deliver value, and you know how much you're willing to pay for that value. And we sell these things well in advance, sometimes like a year in advance. But what if the rules for what counts as an impression change after you sell the impression? That's right, everybody. That's what happened. 2 things happened. 1, Apple changed how it downloads podcasts. So it basically doesn't automatically download the podcast just because you're subscribed to it anymore, which is how it used to work. Because like, the internet used to be slow, and so it was good to like download it early so that you wouldn't have to like wait for it to download. That's kind of ridiculous in 2024, so they're not doing that anymore, but that means that those downloads that weren't actually ever plays and were never delivering value, but like the impression numbers were based on including those aren't being counted anymore. So people sold those impressions, but now they aren't being delivered. Second, some podcast apps are now telling advertisers whether or not the ads are being skipped. And so those advertisers are saying, look, you're not delivering the impressions you said you'd deliver to us. But podcasters are like, yeah, but like, we're delivering the same amount of value. Like, you were always paying for things that weren't true impressions. You were paying for people who skipped your ads. You were paying for people who downloaded and never listened. You were always paying for those people. Those people aren't being counted anymore. But now we have like a smaller impression number. And so like per impression, there's more value now. But that's not how a contract works. The contract says this many impressions need to be delivered, and that many impressions aren't being delivered. Now, of course, how this affects individual podcasts matters a lot. Like bigger podcasts, more of this stuff was taken into account. Those podcasts have more clout. But a lot of smaller podcasts, let's take SciShow Tangents, for example, are delivering fewer impressions than they guaranteed they could deliver. There are basically 2 solutions to this problem. 1, you get more people to listen to the podcast. 2, you add new podcast impressions. But as I said earlier in the video, you can't just add them anywhere. You can't just tack it on to the end of the episode. If you said you were going to deliver a mid-roll, you have to deliver a mid-roll. If you said you were going to deliver a mid-roll that was the first mid-roll in a sequence of mid-rolls, you have to have it be first. So you can't tack it on to the end, and you can't lump it into the middle with the existing mid-roll. You have to introduce a new mid-roll, which is all by way of saying, if you've been listening to a podcast recently, and suddenly there's an ad playing where you didn't expect to hear an ad, that's what's going on. Now, theoretically, this is just like a year-long problem, because as I have implied a number of times, the same amount of value is being delivered. Both skipped impressions and downloads that didn't get listened to had previously been included in the impressions that were delivered. You're delivering the same amount of value you always were with fewer impressions, so you get paid the same amount for fewer impressions, more dollars per impression. But that only happens when you negotiate the next deal, and all of these things are sold well in advance. So advertisers are just getting a ton of free advertising right now because contracts we signed a year ago don't take into account the changes that these platforms have made. So much fun! So 2 suggestions. 1, if you can help us out, you can go and subscribe to SciShow Tangents. It's me and two of my friends, science expert Sarah Riley and resident everyman Sam Scholl. Every episode we have a science poem, we do science trivia, and then they have the fact off, where they each bring a wild fact about our universe and I judge which one is the better fact. We also answer a science question from our listeners, and every episode we end off with a butt fact. It's a great time and I love it a lot, and currently we are not meeting our guaranteed ad impression, so if you could download it and check it out, that would be super. And second, if podcasts that you love have surprising new ads right now, that's why. So have a little grace, cause like no one really did anything wrong here. Like it makes sense that it would be a good idea to count skips. It makes sense that Apple shouldn't be downloading podcasts you're not gonna listen to, but it created this temporary problem that we are all struggling through right now.